When the topic of our esteemed freshman Congresswoman, Ocasio-Cortez, came up, I said, look, she's wrong. Jimmy Dore is right in his criticism of her. But I encouraged people to not, jump on her. I said, she could get better. Let's hope. I tried to, keep it real, and that's generally the attitude that I have, right? When it comes to any progressive politician, right, any political figure, I feel like we shouldn't be too dismissive. We shouldn't immediately jump up and condemn. We should be patient with people. We should praise what is good, not just jump on top of what is bad. There's way too much call-out culture, people just condemning each other, people just screaming, people being shrill. You disagreed with me on this. You disagreed with me on that. Twitter and social media, way too much negativity going on. The way you get things done in the real world is you associate with people with whom you don't agree on everything. You make alliances with people with whom you don't agree on everything. You shake hands, you make an agreement, you find common ground. So I was urging people to, while I agree with Jimmy Dore and his criticism and how, she should, stand up to Nancy Pelosi, I was telling people to chill out. Well, folks, after looking at how social media has gone for the past 48 hours, I decided that I'm just going to come out and say it. Folks, I have had it up to my gizzard with Jacobin. I have had it up to my gizzard with Jacobin magazine, okay? They have always irked me and irritated me, and I have tried to be somewhat restrained until the last few months. I've tried to just, think, there's probably good people at Jacobin. There's probably people who start out reading Jacobin who could get better. So just hold it in. Just if Jacobin publishes an article you agree with, share it without comment. But just hold it in. Just hold it in. But I've had it up to here. I am so tired of Jacobin magazine. I am so sick of Jacobin. Okay, let's just talk about the first thing about Jacobin that just really tells you what they're all about. The name. Folks, the name Jacobin. Who were the Jacobins? They were a faction in the French Revolution that was considered the more radical faction in the French Revolution that conducted mass executions, beheadings. They were well known for chopping people's heads off. They had the Committee of Public Safety, Jean-Paul Marat and Danton, and it was a rather bloodthirsty group of people, right? The Jacobins were not nice folks. They had good ideals. They brought down the monarchy, role of law enforcement. They brought down the monarchy. They were trying to build some kind of egalitarian society. They were very radical liberals, I guess. They were a radical faction in the French Revolution. But, I might let them get away with having a magazine called Jacobin if these weren't the people. If their publication did not constantly condemn anybody who supports the Soviet Union. If you think the Soviet Union was a good country, well, you're just absolutely wrong. The Soviet Union was Stalinist. It was evil. You support modern China. Oh, my God, modern China is evil and wrong. If you support Cuba, oh, my God, they've dumped on Venezuela. They have dumped on any progressive socialist country around the world they've dumped on. But their name is Jacobin. Okay, if Stalin's bad because Stalin kills people. Russia or China's bad because Mao kills people, right? Cuba's bad because Cuba kills people. But hey, these French people after the revolution ain't that great. We're going to name our publication after them. I mean, it is the most blatant Western chauvinism. I mean, it is really unbelievable. I mean, folks, I'm thinking, we tankies. What if we came out with a publication and we called it, because the Jacobins, a group of people that went around chopping people's heads off without really due process or trial, big, crowds of people cheering as they're beheading people, right? Rather violent group of people. What if we had a publication and we called it Gulag Security Team? You think that would be okay? Let's have a publication called Gulag Security Team. Or I know, we'll have a tanky publication, and we'll call it a Berlin Wall Attendant. Berlin Wall Attendant. How would that go? I mean, give me a break. Right? These people go around shaming and condemning anybody who defends Cuba, anyone who defends Venezuela, and their publication is called Jacobin. It's literally named after people who cut people's heads off, who conducted mass executions. Okay, I mean, you can't make this up. The hypocrisy there is beyond anything, right? It's not something they defend. It's the actual name of their publication. But see, the Jacobins were in France. We're in France, and France is a Western European country. See? And it was a Western European revolution against feudalism to bring up Western liberal values. Because the West is the best. That's what the Proud Boys chant. Did you know that? The racist Proud Boys, the white supremacist group of Trump supporters that were in D.C. over the weekend and Olympia, Washington, scuffling people, they chant, West is the best. That's one of their chants. That should be the mantra of the Jacobin magazine. That should be the mantra of Vosh. That should be the mantra of Skippy the Bear. All these people. West is the best. West is the best. Yes, when we cut off people's heads, it's good. It serves liberal ideals. But anybody who dares, defend the Eastern socialism, oh, no, 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 no. For them, socialism is about spreading Western, liberal, individualist ideas across the planet, even if it means mass death and killing, like the Jacobins did. And so there you go. Now, obviously, though, I have a bigger beef with them than just their name, because I've been following them for years, folks. I mean, as somebody who's in the socialist movement and been around the socialist movement for a long time, I've been following these things. So, all right. So one way that you can keep track of who is actually doing good work and getting things done in the socialist movement is very good. It's a great way to tell how someone's doing good work. Jacobin dumps on them. I'm serious, right? Tulsi Gabbard, Congresswoman Tulsi Gabbard, right? All of a sudden, she was speaking up about Syria. She was exposing the crimes of the so-called rebels that were being funded by the U.S. government. She was building she's a Bernie-crat, healthcare for all, but on top of that, then she wanted to legalize marijuana, and she was building like a Bernie Sanders campaign that was actually anti-imperialist. So of course, Tulsi Gabbard, she gets attacked by Jacobin, right? And immediately they run an article. Tulsi Gabbard is not your friend. And they run this whole big article, right? Why? Because she was doing some good work, right? Tulsi Gabbard was actually exposing the crimes of imperialism. Tulsi Gabbard was running a version of Bernie Sanders' campaign that was actually anti-imperialist, right? She was a Democrat who was not only a socialist in terms of domestic stuff, but was actually critical of imperialism. So they attacked her. Another great example, India. November 18th of this year, right as the farmers of India are going out on protesting, leading up to what eventually became the big strike that's happening in India right now, where 250 million workers went out on strike, as the workers of India start to pour into the streets against Modi and his neoliberal cutbacks regimes. What happens? Jacobin takes a big dump on the workers of India. And they publish this whole article about the Indian left is failing. It's failing. Really? Well, when's the last time Bernie Sanders called out 250 million workers on strike? When's the last time that the Trotskyite College Professor Association has called out anything that had any impact on the U.S. economy? But oh no, November 18th, just as the Indian left is revving up to finally get things done, they take a giant dump all over the communist groups of India, the Communist Party of India Marxist, the Communist Party of India, all of them just blah, oh, the Indian left sucks, it's failing. Why? It's getting something done. Venezuela, right? Venezuela was under all-out attack, right? And people were worried that they were going to fall, but, the Maduro has gotten them through the worst of it, right? And they've gotten through the food crisis, and they're getting stronger every day. And you'll notice that Jacobin, which had been wasn't exactly clear, as soon as Venezuela was ready to fight and was winning, all of a sudden Jacobin took a giant dump on Venezuela, right? And you can bet, right now they're supporting the government of Bolivia. You can bet that if the government of Bolivia actually starts doing good things, Jacobin will take a giant dump on them as well. And it's like predictable what Jacobin is going to do. If anyone is actually going to do anything good, Tulsi Gabbard in the United States, Indian workers and Indian labor unions, the Venezuelan government, if anyone is actually doing anything good around the world, right? The Belt and Road, they've attacked China for the Belt and Road. Anyone's actually going to get anything done, They attack them, right? And of course, now are they supporting Jimmy Dore and saying that, hey, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez should stand up more to Nancy Pelosi? Of course not. They've admitted now, just earlier tonight, with Jimmy Dore, a Jacobin writer admitted that he opposed actually standing up to Nancy Pelosi. He admitted this. And they ran an article saying that, no, we don't support Jimmy Dore's call to actually stand up to Nancy Pelosi. I mean, give me a break. I mean, this is a publication that anybody that is actually doing anything good to oppose war, to oppose racism, to oppose what's going on, they take a dump on them, right? But they're edgy. They're oh so edgy. They're so edgy. So edgy. Edgy. Oh my God, read them. They're just so edgy. It is like got the most hipster. Every so often they do something that is completely wacky, but it's designed to make them feel edgy. Like my favorite, this was, during the Ferguson uprising. Folks remember the Ferguson uprising near St. Louis? There's this town called Ferguson. The people of the town are rising up against the police. Of course, the Revolutionary Communist Party, the RCP, went to Ferguson. And of course, they're telling the people, hey, if you Bob Avakian is the answer. Join the Maoist communist revolution. Get down with the revolution, man. And their RCP is acting kind of silly. The Bob Avakian cult is acting wacky in Ferguson. And, they're on social media. So, I kid you not, Jacobin runs an article defending the RCP in Ferguson. Right? At the whole moment, everyone's telling the RCP, hey, you're being a little cringe here. You're all white and the people here are black and you're saying wacky stuff. Can you just chill? They ran an article defending the Revolutionary Communist Party. They can't defend Venezuela, can't defend Tulsi Gabbard, can't criticize AOC, can't support the workers of India. But Bob Avakian's, newspaper selling club and they ran an article, this big long article in defense of outside agitators. And then of course they're walking around like, oh, look at us. We defended the Maoist group that went to Ferguson. Yes, look how edgy we are. They always do something to try and make it look like they're edgy or something. It is ridiculous, right? So they'll defend Bob Avakian, but they won't defend Tulsi Gabbard. They won't defend the workers of India. They won't defend Venezuela. It is obnoxious. It has this fake edginess to it, folks. Now, I don't take credit for this, right? It was not my work. I did not discover this. But Ben Norton and the folks at Gray Zone did some basic research into who funds Jacobin. And they discovered that the primary financial backer of Jacobin magazine is an entity called the Jewish Communal Fund. The Jewish Communal Fund is a pro-Israel lobby group. They run pro-Israel campus tours. They fund J Street, which is a pro-Israel but critical, a more liberal pro-Israel lobby group. And they fund tours where they take college kids from the United States and fly them to Israel. And unlike Birthright, which is like the right-wing one, they give more liberal tours where they admit some of the bad things they do. And the Jewish Communal Fund, which is pro-Israel, it doesn't matter that they're Jewish. I don't care that they're Jewish. Their religion is their business, right? And that's not the thing. I know a lot of people who practice Judaism, have Jewish heritage. Forget the word Jewish. That has nothing to do with what I'm talking about. But this is a pro-Israel group, a group that does pro-Israeli lobbying, right? And lobbies college students, lobbies people in the United States, actually funds J Street, which lobbies on Capitol Hill, right, for Israel. So a pro-Israeli lobby group is funding Jacobin magazine. And, I mean, you think that might be an issue? And then people say to me, look, they published this article that criticized Israel. Well, gee, I know a publication, another publication that criticizes Israel. You know what it's called? Haaretz. There's another publication that's always criticizing Israeli policy. You know what it's called? It's called the Jerusalem Post, right? Oh, Jacobin wrote this article criticizing Israel. Proves nothing, right? I mean, I'm sorry. There are disagreements in Israeli politics. Let me break this down for you. Not all Israelis agree with every Israeli government policy. See, Israel is a country. and it has rival political parties in it. Now, there's this party called Likud, which is led by Netanyahu, and they like Donald Trump, see. But there's this other party in Israel called the Israeli Labor Party that pretends to be a socialist party, see. They don't like Donald Trump, right? Netanyahu came to the United States and gave a speech against Barack Obama. Remember that? And a lot of Israeli generals, a lot of Israeli military people told Netanyahu not to do that. You see, not everyone in Israel agrees on everything. Israel is not a secret conspiracy. Israel is not a vast plot. It's not a thing upon a thing. Israel is a country, see? Israel is a country. And just like Saudi Arabia, and just like Turkey, and just like Britain, and just like China, there are lobby groups in the United States that support Israel. And one of those lobby groups is called the Jewish Communal Fund. And that is who pays for Jacobin. Is this hard for people to understand? Like, what in what I just said was anti-Semitic? I mean, what in what I just said immediately? If you point this out, do they deny it? No. Do they say, well, that's okay? No. They just say anti-Semitism, anti-Semitism, anti-Semitism. It's like, it's not anti-Semitic, right? I mean, I work for media from Russia, right? I work for a TV network from Russia. If anyone points that out, do I say to them, you're anti-Russian? No, right? I think it's a great outfit. I'm very proud of the work that I do. But is it a fact that the company that I work for is from Russia? Yes. And is that a bigoted, ethnically racist statement? No. So just pointing out that the primary financial backer of this magazine that has been anointed as the voice of socialism is an Israeli lobby group, is not offensive and not anti-Semitic. And the fact that they go there immediately, if you bring this up, if you go there, they just, anti-Semite, anti-Semite, anti-Semite. The fact that they go there shows that they are very defensive about that. They are very, very defensive about that. And that I've noticed that people want to pretend it's not true. It's on their tax forms. Ben Norton revealed this, right? I mean, he just posted on Twitter their tax forms. It's not a secret. It is a matter of public record that Jacobin magazine is funded by Israeli lobby groups. That is a fact. If you bring it up, they just shout anti-Semite and they don't want to talk about it. Now, it's also a little bit interesting, and the folks at Gray Zone, Ben Norton, they have really dug into this. At Jacobin's public conferences, this is a socialist group, so you think that you would have people at your conference that are advocates of socialism, right? You know, I mean, if you're going to have people from around the world at your conferences as a socialist organization, you would have people from socialist governments, you'd have people from socialist parties. At Jacobin's conferences, they have people that are trying to overthrow the socialist government of China, automation, and thank you, Jazz No Jazz. They have people that are trying to overthrow the socialist government of Venezuela. They have people that are trying to overthrow the socialist government of Bolivia. They have all kinds of people at their conferences that are involved in U.S.-backed imperialist efforts to overthrow socialist governments. And they give them a platform, and they have all kinds of people who come to their conference. Oh, look, it's a socialist conference. And they hear that, we got to overthrow the government of Nicaragua. We got to overthrow the government of Venezuela. We got to overthrow the Syrian government. Jacobin, as a voice of socialism, goes around basically trying to convince leftists to overthrow and help overthrow socialist governments. Like, if that's not in and of itself disturbing. Now, another thing I wanted to mention about them, this is just thing. I've been listening to the Young Turks for years. I mean, they're on YouTube, whatever. They're around. You know, the internet, I'm watching all these fighting, this fight, Jimmy Dore versus AOC and all this stuff go down. So I'm looking at, one of these Young Turks, Young Turks hosts or whatever, who's criticizing Jimmy Dore, is Anna Kasparian. And I recognize Anna Kasparian, right? Young Turks, very famous, right? Yeah, Anna Kasparian. Anna Kasparian of the Young Turks. I look, she's listed as Jacobin. And I'm like, that can't be right. Anna Kasparian? Jacobin? Anna Kasparian's not a Marxist, okay? I mean, she's good, she's friendly, I don't disagree with some of the things she says, but she's not a Marxist. But no, according to Jacobin, she is, right? Jacobin, Anna Kasparian's a Marxist. Anna Kasparian is a Marxist. The Venezuelans aren't, but Anna Kasparian is. Anna Kasparian is a Marxist? Really? Anna Kasparian is a Marxist. I mean, that was the first one I heard. But folks, if you really want to get into who Jacobin are, right? And you know, we can talk about the JCF, Israeli lobby group that funds them. We can talk about, you know, we can talk about a lot of different things about them. But if you really want to know who they are, okay, you have to look into, there's a trend in U.S. history called State Department socialism, right? Michael Harrington. Do people know the name Michael Harrington? Michael Harrington. So Michael Harrington, he was a Shachtmanite Trotskyist, right? He was a follower of Max Shachtman. And he was a follower of Max Shachtman, and he wrote a book called The Other America, which was about poverty. And he was hired to work in the administration of Lyndon Johnson, and to run some poverty programs. And Michael Harrington was his name, and he had been a Shachtmanite Trotskyist. And Max Shachtman, his mentor, supported the Bay of Pigs invasion. And he was somewhat supportive of the Vietnam War, eventually changed his position and opposed the Vietnam War, but at first he supported the Vietnam War. And he was, you know, you Google Michael Harrington, he was a State Department socialist. So as the 1970s went on, right, he was a member of the Socialist Party, but he was basically a Democrat, functioning in the Democrats', you know, wing of government. So the Socialist Party, you have to remember, was very diverse, right? Different people were in it and such. And the 1960s was happening. You had Students for a Democratic Society, and different groups were out protesting. And so the Socialist Party collapsed in the 1970s, and it divided into three factions. And the issue really, in essence, was the Vietnam War. They could not agree on the Vietnam War. There was one faction in the Socialist Party that was 100% against the Vietnam War. And that faction, they formed the Socialist Party USA. And they're still around. They function mainly as an electoral formation. They run for office, SPUSA. You know, they run people for office. That's the Socialist Party of America. I believe the leader of the Socialist Party at the time that it broke away from, at the time the American Socialist Party broke apart and you had Socialist Party USA formed, their leader he was the first openly gay man to run for president, David McReynolds. And I interviewed David McReynolds many times. He was an openly gay man. He was a pacifist. He was 100% against the Vietnam War. So there was the Socialist Party USA. Then there was a faction that supported the Vietnam War, of socialists who supported the Vietnam War, were like supporters of it. And they became Social Democrats USA. And eventually they endorsed Ronald Reagan. They were socialists for Reagan. They went the other way. There was this faction in the middle. And it was probably the majority. It was the biggest faction in the Socialist Party when it broke apart in the 70s. That was kind of against the Vietnam War. Emphasis on kind of. Like, not completely against the Vietnam War, but kind of. That's the faction, led by Michael Harrington, that went on to found Democratic Socialists of America. Irving Howe. You can read about Irving Howe. He was another Trotskyite, another friend of Max Shachtman. Irving Howe, he wrote for the New York Times. He would be their go-to socialist when it was time to dump on the new left. He wrote articles accusing leftists who protested Israel of anti-Semitism. He wrote articles attacking Students for a Democratic Society and the Weather Underground for left adventurism. He was the New York Times go-to Marxist when they needed a Marxist to dump on the socialist movement. His name is Irving Howe. And Irving Howe, older Trotskyite, and he actually was quoted as saying that he believed the socialist movement was a faction of the West in the Cold War, right? And that was his big moment. He had a big fight with Max Shachtman, and one of his defining moments was he said he believed that socialism was a faction of the West, of the Western camp in the Cold War. So that was Irving Howe, right? There's a story about Irving Howe that apparently Irving Howe was on a college campus, and a young Maoist yelled at him, was saying, "You're a sellout, you're a phony." And he said to this young Maoist, he said, "You know what you're going to be? You're going to be a dentist." I don't even know how that's an insult, right? I don't understand that. But apparently, I've asked people, and they've said, well, that's kind of a classist dig. That's saying that you're gonna stop being a socialist, and you're gonna have to start, being, an irrelevant working class person or an irrelevant figure in U.S. society. You're gonna be a dentist. That's the kind of person that Irving Howe was. Apparently, this young Maoist is yelling at him. He says, "You're gonna be a dentist, kid." That was the kind of person he was. Irving Howe. That's the kind of tone, right? There's actually a documentary. Irving Howe was apparently very good friends with Irving Kristol, who's considered the godfather of neoconservatism. There's a documentary called "Arguing the World" that was on PBS, and it's about four friends at City College in New York City in the 1930s who were Trotskyites. And one of them was Irving Kristol, who became the godfather of neoconservatism. The other was Irving Howe, who became like one of the founding intellectuals of DSA, along with Michael Harrington. The other two, I don't even remember their names, but they were all Trotskyites, and they were all good friends, good buddies, and they hated the Communist Party, right? And the Communist Party was the other table, and they were Stalinists, and they hated them. And PBS made this documentary in the late 90s all about, hey, these four good buddies, and one of them became the top neocon, and the other became the top DSA guy, and they were all good buddies, and they were all good friends, and they hated those evil Stalinists. Those Stalinists were no good, were they? And it was on PBS. And so Irving Howe, Michael Harrington, they're the State Department socialist trend. That's who they are. So, they break apart. They form something called Democratic Socialist Organizing Committee. And you have to remember, the world was changing in the 1970s. China was changing a lot. China no longer, the Maoist movement was kind of falling apart. The Cold War, there was détente, and the Cold War was kind of de-escalating. So a magazine called In These Times was published by Michael Harrington. And it was this liberal magazine. And the message of In These Times was kind of like, it was like Leninism is un-American, right? That America is a democratic country. We have beautiful democratic traditions in the United States. And Leninism and Bolshevism are totalitarian and un-American. That was kind of the mantra of In These Times, right? It was this kind of liberal, socialist-y magazine that was very, very anti-Marxist, Leninist, anti-Soviet, anti-Chinese, etc. And that was called In These Times. And Harrington and all of them put it out. And eventually you had the founding of Democratic Socialists of America. And some of the Maoist groups that collapsed even went into it. Like there was a group called the Democratic Workers' Party, which was led by Jean Dixon. It was kind of a strange Maoist feminist party. And in the 1980s, as China was changing, they were getting closer to the government of Romania, and they just dissolved, and all their members joined Democratic Socialists of America. There were some others like this, right? And as the Maoist movement was crashing and burning, like remnants of the Communist Workers' Party went into DSA, and it was kind of when the Maoists kind of threw in the towel, right? As the Maoist groups, right, they had been, in the 70s, they'd been trying to form a new communist party. It was going to be so revolutionary. When they surrendered and they said, all right, we give up, they all joined DSA. That's basically what DSA was. It was their, surrender. It was the equivalent of waving the white flag. When you were a communist revolutionary, when you were a Maoist, when you were a serious revolutionary, when you surrendered, you held up the white flag and said, I joined DSA, I joined Michael Harrington. That's basically what it was. The Michael Harrington trend, that's what DSA was for many years. And, people used to joke that DSA was kind of, it was almost like a fraternity. Right, a lot of labor bureaucrats, labor union bosses were in DSA, and it was kind of, it was basically it was a banquet that happened once a year, and Cornel West was in it, and a lot of well-known intellectuals were in it. Gloria Steinem, do folks know Gloria Steinem, the editor of Ms. Magazine? She was the voice, the leading feminist of the 1970s, and she was well known. She admitted she was a CIA operative in the early 60s. In her autobiography, she brags about being a CIA agent. There was even rumors that she was dating Henry Kissinger for a long time. That turned out to be false, but her boyfriend was for a long time. At the time of COINTELPRO, her boyfriend was a guy at the Department of Justice. She was deep state if there ever was anybody. Gloria Steinem. And Gloria Steinem, in her autobiography, she talks about being a CIA operative. She was a founding member of the DSA. Absolutely, she was a founding member of the DSA, and DSA was just this big tent that if you could join and you wanted to surrender, you could just join the DSA. Now, in the 90s, you have to remember, so the 90s, you have the fall of the Soviet Union, you have Bill Clinton getting in there and NAFTA, so the labor movement is taking a kind of an interesting shift, and so John Sweeney becomes the head of the AFL-CIO, and he's a DSA guy. So people thought DSA was kind of a labor union activist association. That was kind of what people thought DSA was. And then, you'll remember 9/11 and the time of the Iraq War happened. And that's when I first started getting politically active. It was the time of the Iraq War. And at that time, people didn't know DSA still existed. Right? DSA's name, there'd be a big anti-war rally in Washington, D.C., and there'd be 112 organizations would sign on, and the Democratic Socialists of America, their name would be on the list, and people would be like, are they still around? It was very, very weird. But then, around the time of Wisconsin, do you folks remember Wisconsin when, it was in 2011, the labor unions were occupying the state capitol building in Wisconsin to protest their right to work law, their law that was going to hurt organized labor. And you started to hear DSA get more credibility. The first day of Occupy Wall Street, I went to Occupy Wall Street. On the first day, September 17th, I'd been at some of the planning meetings. There was a group of people that were like circling the park, and they had this big red banner that said Democratic Socialists of America, and they had their faces covered in like red bandanas, and they almost looked like the Black Bloc, but they were the Democratic Socialists of America. This is where DSA comes from, right? It is a strange current. It's a lot of academics. It's a lot of college professors. It's a lot of people that have worked in the administration of various presidents, and that's who set up Jacobin magazine. Now, what does that mean? Well, that's who they are, right? DSA is a great place. And after all that I've just said, if I were not, I am at the point in my life, I have a job where I am a journalist, and because of that, I cannot join any political organization. I cannot, because that would threaten my independence. If I were a card-carrying member of any political activist group, any political party, I would not be able to do my job. If, however, I were not in the position I'm in, I would probably join the DSA to meet people, right? Because DSA is a great place to meet people. I've been to DSA events, and especially you go to Long Island, you go to Illinois, you go to New Jersey, you go to Kentucky, you go to Alabama. DSA is where you meet people. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, they're recruiting, they have a lot of people, and if you go to the local DSA meetup, that's where you meet anybody who's interested in socialism. That is the place you will meet them. So, Students for a Democratic Society in the 1960s was a very similar thing. It was started by the same kind of people. Michael Harrington was involved in it, Tom Hayden, right? And it was a similar kind of operation. It was this kind of, mass group that suddenly had lots of money that was with a mass socialist organizing group. But that everybody knew back then that if you were a communist or a leftist or a revolutionary, if you were actually a revolutionary, SDS meetings were where you went to meet good people. And eventually, we know SDS got more and more radical, and pretty soon it was dominated by Maoist factions. So I'm not telling people DSA is your enemy. I'm not telling people to spit on DSA. I think you should all go to DSA events. I think you should all join the DSA and try to meet people at DSA events. Try to talk to them about actual socialism and anti-imperialism. But just keep in mind, who's at the top of the DSA? Who's at the top of the DSA, right? I mean, who started this trend? Jacobin magazine. Look, I will never forget. I first heard of Jacobin magazine. It was years ago, and all of a sudden, like, All In with Chris Hayes, right? Which is like a mainstream MSNBC show, is doing a segment about a socialist magazine that has just opened up. So MSNBC, keep in mind, NBC used to be owned by General Electric, one of the main military contractors, right? NBC, All In with Chris Hayes, they're like, hey, we're just going to do a segment to promote a socialist magazine opening up. Why not? And they just did a whole segment. Hey, guys, did you know that a new socialist magazine just opened up? And NBC did this advertisement for Jacobin. Do you think that happened by accident? What's interesting is that, the DSA crowd, generally stayed away from ideological Marxism. They would run articles about healthcare. They would run articles about the military budget being too big. They didn't run articles about Karl Marx. They didn't run articles about the Paris Commune. They didn't run articles about Mao Zedong thought and all of that. There's a hunger for it. The reason Jacobin came into existence, I'm convinced, is because millions and millions of young people were getting interested in actual Marxism. There was a hunger for knowledge about Lenin and Trotsky and Ho Chi Minh and the Communist Party of the 1930s. So it is, in my view, Jacobin emerged to fill that need by a group of people, the State Department Socialists, the old DSA, Michael Harrington current. It's that current trying to fill that niche, right? There's a market for it. There's a desire to talk about the kind of things that we talk about on these lives. Every time I'm live, we talk about them. There's a hunger for it. So this was formed in a way that, it can give people, it can fulfill their desire. You can have articles about Trotsky and dialectical materialism and all of this, but you're not ever going to convince anybody to actually be an anti-imperialist or revolutionary. And it's always going to channel people into, vote for the Democrats, lobby for the Democrats and spit on the socialist countries. They're all human rights violating regimes. That's the purpose that Jacobin serves.